Ontario.
Environment Canada officials say the winds were as high as 900 kilometers an hour when they smashed in the walls and ripped off the roofs of this townhouse complex. But this is not a story about tornadoes. Good evening, I'm Christine Bentley.
And I'm Ken Shaw. This is a report instead about people who lost their homes, their possessions, the lives of their loved ones, and the people who came to help them rebuild those homes, rebuild those lives, to help them with picking up the pieces.
Picking up the pieces of my sweet shattered dream. I wonder how the old folks are tonight.
It wasn't hard to realize that there's a disaster of considerable proportions. Our local Grand Simcoe foresters were already responding. The Red Cross were on hand. The Canadian Forces Base Borden responded immediately with over 250 troops. Just everybody came in, the regional police forces, Metro Police sent up forces, Ontario Provincial Police, RCMP. I guess we couldn't have asked for or hoped for any better response from all of the agencies involved.
The professional relief agencies had arrived on the scene within minutes of the disaster. And as the police, fire, and ambulance services moved into action, the Canadian Army troops from Camp Borden quickly set up a rigid system of checkpoints to secure the areas hardest hit and prevent looting. The flashing lights amidst the destruction provided people in shock with a sense that help was on the way. Emergency centers were set up to house the displaced and provide them with food and drink if they needed it, or a place to sleep if they hadn't found friends to spend the night with. And the donations started pouring in. Clothing in all sizes and descriptions suddenly turned up in piles available to anyone who needed it. By this time, there was no doubt that a major disaster was in progress and that people were responding. The Red Cross quickly began trying to organize the confusion of missing people and calls from friends and relatives inquiring about loved ones they couldn't contact. Service clubs, the Kiwanis, Rotarians, and others began to form a network tying disaster victims together with those who could help. In the days following the tornado, this network would provide the foundation from which an army of volunteers would be organized to help clean up and start rebuilding. It included trucks and workers from the metro area, staying on the scene until the initial cleanup was completed. Along with these charity organizations is one group in particular which provides much of the backbone of the workforce. That group is the Mennonites. In some cases, they've come hundreds, even thousands of miles to get here. That's no extraordinary feat to them. It's their duty. Trees and branches that were down by the winds must be cleared and loaded into garbage trucks. Piles of rubble from demolished houses, bricks and glass, wood and wallboard in a tangled mess are shoveled up and loaded. It's a task that has to be done, and one that the Mennonites don't mind doing. Some came great distances to lend a hand. David Bunnett saw the television news reports at his home in New Brunswick and came to help.
All their life they've been working on it, paying for a house or a farm or anything, and all of a sudden the tornado just came and wiped it all out, and they don't know where to start. So if we all come together as brothers and sisters, we can all help to rebuild their lives, cleaning up and rebuilding and just helping out that way.
Certainly there's work to do at home, but the need here is greater at the moment, and we want to share in a positive witness, you know, what our faith means to us. It's more than simply paying lip service, but we want to be actively involved and seeking to help and minister to those who have need. We believe that this is what Christ taught us to do, and we seek to live by that.
The Mennonite tradition of community effort was born out of need in days gone by. Using many hands to make light work was the only way to get homes and barns built. Today, that tradition lives on through the Mennonite Disaster Service, and the spirit of helping people in need makes a huge difference. Indeed, watching members of the disaster service in action is a scene reminiscent from an era gone by.
The inside, put them on the left-hand side here.
Using many of the timbers salvaged from the barn that was knocked down by the tornado, the workers begin to haul the pieces into place. The foundation hasn't been damaged, so it has been cleaned off and the building begins. Within hours, the walls of the barn are taking shape, and the workers are ready to hoist them into place. Every man, young or old, knows exactly what he's supposed to do. Ropes support the wall as it's pulled into place. For some, it's a high wire balancing act as they work, clinging to the beams with the greatest of ease. From a distance, the scene resembles a colony of ants busily working their way through a maze. Hundreds of nails are pounded into place as a foreman shouts orders.
Just one more yet. Hey, see it already.
The skeleton of the barn is ready to have its outer layer applied. In one working day, a barn is raised from the ground where a pile of debris used to sit.
Once our people noticed the first barn going up, then there was a tremendous response in what could be done in such a short period of time. And now the rest of our neighbors are responding to that and interested in putting up barns. Possibly the most, or the strongest point that I see coming across is the fact they are not a part of this community. They are total strangers. None of us know them, but they just come and they help.
The only break the Mennonites take in a 10 or 12-hour day is lunch break. In the town of Arthur, the men show up promptly at noon at the curling club, which has become the local disaster relief center. A bucket of water outside provides a refreshing wash-up, getting rid of the day's toil. Once inside, the Mennonites line up for hot soup and sandwiches. But before anything is eaten, prayers are said, a serious, somber moment of thanksgiving and reflection. Lunch doesn't last a full hour. There is too much work left to be done. The Mennonites aren't just building 1 or 2 barns. They're rebuilding dozens. And it's not as if they have a lot of spare time on their hands. Most of these workers all have their own farms, and this is haying season.
Over 90% of these people will be farmers, so they got chores they got to be doing, and but we're just, among ourselves, kind of taking turns, and we got a feeling for these people. That's for sure. Like, we're not that far from here. It could just as well might have been us, and we feel fortunate that we're able to help them, really.
The man who owns this farm still has trouble believing the Mennonites are helping him rebuild. He says they've given him the hope that he can start over.
It means that I can get started, but I wouldn't be about it otherwise, I just simply wouldn't have the time or the courage to get going, All I can be is thankful for them, and, just wonder how I'll ever repay them, They all say, well, I hope my barn don't blow down, so you have to repay me that way, but, I'm certainly not going to repay them all, that's for sure, but, I work the rest of my life and, and never repay people, but what do you do, They say, well, we're just glad it didn't happen to us, and we're willing to give a few days at a time.
One of the Mennonites says he has had a personal experience with disaster, so he knows how important help is.
I guess some of us had maybe a similar experience already. It's just like we lost our house in 85 or in 82, and the way the friends and neighbors come together, it really made us feel good. Togetherness is, it shows, well, it says love one another as thyself. I guess that's the way we feel. If it was us, we'd feel people come and help us too.
It's hard to measure the value of the contribution these people are making. The labor costs alone of erecting a barn such as this could run as high as $25,000 or more. But for them, money has nothing to do with it. It's the Bible's message, help thy neighbor, which they take quite literally. As the finishing touches are being put on the family barn, Mrs. Shaw is scratching away at the family vegetable garden. There isn't much left. Topsoil and plants were carried away. But a gift of tomato plants from the Mennonites has given her somewhere to start and given her the chance to see good coming out of all the destruction.
Well, it's just something that can't describe, really. It's just great. Everybody's really pulled together, and the school children have been out helping, and everybody's just, it's unbelievable, really. You know, lots of times we don't even see our neighbors for weeks at a time. Well, now everybody's banding together to save what we can, I guess, and for the go ahead again and best we can, and it's
The physical rebuilding obviously plays an important role in beginning the longer process of emotional restructure. Mary Martin Smith has just returned from a seminar in Pennsylvania on helping disaster victims cope psychologically.
Basically, it's a grieving process. Because people have lost a lot of possessions, they've lost pets, they've lost their grandmother's wedding ring that has been blown away by the tornado. Some people in Barrie particularly have lost jobs because of the destruction of the industrial center. So basically, people are going to be grieving for a lot of the things that they've lost. And the grieving process really takes a varied amount of time.
The faces of disaster victims tell the story of the frustration, anger, and emotional strain. People who lost homes and property were called to this meeting put on by the hastily assembled Disaster Relief Committee. There were many questions about relief, insurance, and the hopes of rebuilding.
What about the people in the townhouse units that were allowed to go in and remove their stuff for 2 hours on Saturday and a few hours on Sunday, and now they have to prove to the insurance company what they had and what they didn't get out?
You have the obligation, of course, to list your claim, as Mr. Bell told you earlier, to identify each and every item that you have, when you purchased it, where you purchased it, what you paid for the item, the description of it, and then submit your claim to the insurance adjuster.
Now my car, which was at the house at the time and ended up a few doors down, is a little bit damaged, to say the least. I was wondering if there's a possibility of contribution towards that type of a claim.
The car was registered in your name?
Yes.
Well, I can't answer the question, but I suggest you get a claim form and put the claim in and see how we handle it.
Okay. Thanks.
This man lost his home, all of his possessions, and he lost his daughter.
And what's really helped is, in my case here, is the people in the city of Barrie, like, have pulled together. And I have this great saying, everybody all across the country says beautiful Barrie, but what makes Barrie so beautiful is the people in it. We've had calls, people we don't even know, etc., not just offering us everything under the sun and that. And what I'm doing is taking it not one day at a time, but 1 minute at a time right now. Sometimes it's, you don't know, I'm just angry, frustrated, I don't know. There's no words that you can express it.
People need to realize that they're not abnormal, that the kinds of responses, the anger, the denial, the frustration that they're feeling, it's all normal, and that they're going to go through a lot of different stages. Those feelings may recur at different times, but that they're, you know, they're not unique, that this is just part of the process.
I think this tornado, everything, and the death of my daughter, along with the other 11 throughout the different communities, and that should bring people a lot closer together and let them think, you know, of their own lives and how we stress for this, that, and everything else. And when it boils right down to it, most precious things are people. And monetary things are second, eh? And we all take it for granted, and I think it's gonna, I know a lot of people I've talked to, they're already evaluating their own lives, eh?
Those who survived but were closely touched remain in shock 2 weeks after the tornadoes. Some young children still have not returned to St. John Vianney School. The Board of Education is providing psychological assistance to these youngsters and their families. The classes are now housed at Georgian College, where the children are bused each day. It will be some time before their school is in any shape to conduct business as usual. The clock on the wall still shows the time power was cut off, moments before the twister cut through here. The curtains torn to shreds by flying glass as windows exploded. School had just been let out. Only 2 teachers and a caretaker were caught in these darkened halls when the twister hit. They escaped physical injury, but the emotional injury remains for some.
Children are pretty vulnerable. They aren't prepared to handle disaster, for one thing, and depending on the age group of the child, they often feel that they were to blame only because of parental reaction. You know, mommy's upset, and she's sitting on what was left of their couch, and she's crying, and the child thinks maybe that's something that they've done, and that's why mommy is crying. And it's okay for mommy to cry, but mommy should say, mommy's crying because she lost her wedding pictures, or she's lost something else, and it's nothing you've done.
I felt, sad. You lose a lot of your stuff that you've had for a long time that's in your room, or since my room is on the 2nd floor, like my room is destroyed. And felt scared and a bit sad. And then they call it an act of God. When the insurance companies call it that, they shouldn't call it that. It's just an act of nature. It's just normal. It happens.
Young people have played a major role in helping to clean up. In Holland Marsh, which escaped the full fury of the tornadoes, hundreds of children were bussed in to help remove the remnants of greenhouses that were twisted into a mess and hurled hundreds of meters.
The fields are littered with storages, pieces of aluminum. It's total destruction. The people work all their lives, and then it's gone in about 10 seconds. It just makes you feel so small. You can't sit here and cry about it. You have to keep going. It's like,
Volunteers throughout the recovery area are kept on their feet through the work of the Red Cross, which is providing hundreds of sandwiches, hot soups, and coffee and muffins. Amateur radio clubs are providing communications to tie together the supply crews and get them from one hungry group of volunteers to another.
Roger, right now they're just making up their minds as to whether we're all going to come back in. It appears as if everybody that we can find has been fed.
The Kiwanis, Rotarians, and a host of other service and church groups are all playing integral roles in the rebuilding process, providing the support disaster victims need and helping to bring some hope for the future, when each day they're faced with the reminder that they have such a long way to go in rebuilding.
I think the hardest part is that whenever I go back to the area where I lived, I feel worse each time I see my house. At first, I suppose I was numb, but now if I'm in that area, I just feel devastated.
If it was me, I would truly appreciate if someone came and give their assistance at a time of need like this. And I love people, and I care. And so therefore I was only too glad to come up, drive up myself, and do what I could.
The people that came here the day before were from Dorchester outside London. They took a week off holidays and they came up here and they were cleaning. We had more of a mess even that day. But today now I don't know these people as well because I didn't get talking to them. I just came up here now. But it's wonderful what they've done.
Throughout this disaster, there have been some incredible tales of people who narrowly escaped with their lives, surviving to find that what they took so long to build up was torn down. For one couple, the destruction was something they will never see. Fred and Devin Raymond are blind. Nevertheless, Fred built this house. It took him 20 years to complete the work. When the house was blown apart, the Raymonds, too, had to depend on the aid of others.
The first inkling that I had that our house had been severely damaged was when I felt some insulation above us. but we heard the glass shattering, and we knew that I first thought that the front window had come in, but when I found the insulation down around us, I realized that the damage was much more extensive than that. And then the neighbor next door to us came, and boy, I tell you, his voice was music to our ears.
Still, they consider themselves lucky. They lost everything they had, except each other.
I guess everything's gone.
But you're both alive.
Yes.
Well,
Thank God for that.
Yes, we've got a lot to be thankful for.
For Fred and Devin Raymond and all the other people who are forced to rebuild homes, there are some technical considerations that must be taken into account. The brutal force of the tornado only partially destroyed many homes, so before rebuilding can take place, a certain amount of demolition is necessary. One contractor says the demolition costs will add a lot to the price of the townhouses he hopes to rebuild.
Demolition is as bad as building in the first place, sometimes worse, because you have to get rid of the materials. So you're bringing trucks and equipment in to get rid of the stuff. You have to salvage what you can, because estimating a job like this here, you have to figure, well, there is some things that will be salvageable, but a lot of it will not be.
There is another logistical problem that homeowners must deal with before they can commit themselves to rebuilding. They must first find out to what extent insurance will cover them, or if they didn't have insurance, to what extent donations to the Disaster Relief Fund will help them. The Relief Fund is still young, as donations from radiothons, telethons, and charities, as well as assorted fundraisers, continues. The provincial government has pledged to match donations 3-to-1, and the federal government has pledged funds as well. But the Relief Fund is not writing any checks yet, so no one can say for sure how much money they will get. No time limit has been set on when checks will start arriving, but organizers say it could take at least 4 months, the same amount of time it took before the first check was written following the Woodstock disaster. That tornado, which struck on August 7th, 1979, is being viewed as the case model for the current relief effort.
The Woodstock tornado struck in August 1979. Homes, farms, and lives were thrown into a mess, as they are now in central Ontario. After the dead were buried, the survivors began piecing together their lives. They have many stories to tell about how they coped with the shock and how they managed to look to the future. Snapshots from family albums tell the story of barns that were once destroyed. Now they are rebuilt and are again prosperous. Where cattle lay dead after the tornado, new herds are now grazing in fields that have regained their grass and between fences that have been rebuilt. Joyce Brown's house in Oxford Centre was torn apart by the tornado. Now she has a new home. Marilyn Merkley also lost her home, and she has rebuilt. The two survivors have a lot of advice to offer people who are now struggling to rebuild.
You didn't even have patience and keep your cool. And just each day seems a little better than the day before.
The best thing for them to do is to budget well and take their time at doing what the list that the insurance company wants. They want a list of everything that you owned, and you've got to fill it in, and you have to cope with that. And it's hard to at the time, but you do it. And it's important you do it.
All the insurance and financing your home and financing your day-to-day living, it all pans out in the end. But it's stressful while you're going through it.
The massive cleanup is tough, but once you get through that and start going ahead, then things seem to level out, and if they have patience and work hard, I think that they'll find that eventually the tough part is over with and they can start coasting downhill a bit.
Marilyn and Joyce both remember the difficulties their families encountered staying with friends and relatives. Close quarters made living uncomfortable at times, but by staying together as a family unit, they managed.
We happened to live with relatives, and it created a lot of stress, and the best thing is to do things as a family and stay together as a family unit.
The people that are experiencing the tornado now, they'll probably find until they are back in their homes, they're going to be in close quarters, either in trailers or with relatives, friends. And you can find that you feel really hemmed in, and you have so much on your mind that it is a stressful time. And if they can just gather their own families, as Marilyn said, a bit and do things on their own, just to keep the family together. But I'd say it goes hand in hand, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. And also they should talk about it. Talk to other people, to friends, not hold it in, and not just start dwelling on what ifs, because you can't dwell on the past and you can't dwell on what ifs. You have to talk about it and go forward.
Even now that houses are rebuilt and lives are back in order, the tornado has made a lasting change, especially when stormy weather threatens.
Very nervous of thunderstorms, and when there's severe weather warnings, we are watching the sky continually and ready to head for the basement.
In the years to come, the discussions will no doubt center on the events of May 31st, the eyewitness accounts of the terrible destruction.
But there will also be talk about the days and weeks that followed when people came from miles around to help others they didn't even know, rebuilding their homes, their lives, to help them with picking up the pieces.
Been in trouble, but I'm okay. Been through the ringer, but I'm okay. Walls are falling and I'm okay. Under the mercy and I'm okay.